we did have a development in the NCAA versus the House case, and that I mean the main development here we thought we were going to get some resolution on that this week, as far as roster sizes and things like that, and unfortunately we are not going to get that. This has been uh the final resolution of this, the final judgment on this thing has been pushed back to June 27th. We were expected to get it June 6th, which is obviously this Friday. And now it has been moved back to June 27th. So we're not going to get this for a couple weeks. And why that's significant is because the new the new revenue sharing model kicks in, I believe, on July 1st. So you're pushing up right to that deadline, as far as new roster sizes and things like that, and ruling on how revenue sharing and all this is going to work. um, does this? I'm not entirely sure what. I don't know if this means anything, one way or the other on how this is all gonna get end up shaking out. But essentially, they just extended um to allow for for summary judgment, to file summary judgment and to get a potential appeal in as well. So we're not going to get a resolution on this for a couple weeks, and we're not going to get it until or well, most of a month really. And we're not going to get it till right before that July 1st revenue sharing kicks in. So this is a precarious situation that I know many people involved are very frustrated with, from coaches to administrators to athletes, just trying to figure out what the hell's going on, especially in college football where this is most impactful, obviously the biggest moneymaker by far, most athletes involved as far as a single sport goes. So it's a massive deal because college football right now is in a very strange place. The sport that we grew up watching in the 90s or 2000s or whatever it is, just frankly just doesn't exist anymore. It is a different sport entirely. It's become a creature of its own. And unfortunately, there is now a kind of a big bad at the table. Not that there hasn't been for a while, but it was you could spread the blame around a little bit, and it wasn't just one group or whatever that it was making things difficult. There were certainly major players involved in this, but it wasn't just a unanimous, oh, this is the person that's messing things up, this is the person that's causing all the problems. But unfortunately we are starting to circle the drain on that, and no surprise it is the SEC commissioner Greg Sankey, who continues to his march towards being the absolute big bad in college football. Keep so Dukes are wondering why do they care about this is beyond me. So the reason that Congress cares about this, and cares is kind of a funny word to use here because I think they want to get this resolved because this is something that a lot of their voters care about, and I also think that you know I think they would probably rather work on something else. I hope they would, because this is, in the grand scheme of all the things in this country that are not great right now and that are difficult and that need to be fixed. College football is one of them, but should not be nearly as high a priority. But unfortunately, so many people have kicked the can down the road on this issue for so long that now you're talking about antitrust issues and you're talking about, you know, uh, labor disputes and things like that, to the point where now it is becoming a massive problem that Congress does need to weigh in on, because there's um, nobody for decades and decades and decades, really since the 70s and 80s, that has been interested in trying to control this thing and to grow this thing in the right way. Um, the NCAA the NCAA stood there as a figurehead for such a long time, and tried to basically they had to do a fake it till you make it type of thing, and as far as enforcement and trying to act as the governing body for all this. But unfortunately, their bluff was eventually called, and people figured out that the NCAA has no teeth. They can't enforce anything, and that none of these schools are beholden to the NCAA basically at all. And so that's why the NCAA is, as it relates to college football, is basically dead. And frankly, as it relates to most other sports, is not in a good shape. Is not like is doesn't have any of the bite that people thought they had for a long time, or that the NCAA thought they had for a long time. But unfortunately, the reason that Congress cares about this is because they kind of have to now, because you're talking about billions and billions and billions of dollars that are getting thrown around, and you're talking about, like I said, you're talking about labor issues, you're talking about antitrust monopoly type issues. There's a lot of major legal components to this that do reach the scale of needing government intervention because it wasn't dealt with a long time ago. If this was dealt with in the 80s or 90s or even the 2000s, if this was dealt with before now, I don't think we wouldn't have to be relying on Congress, your elected representatives and senators. Um, you wouldn't be relying on them to tell you how many football players you can have on your college football roster. But that's just where we are, because the sport, as much as anybody that watching the show loves college football, because it is such a fun sport, and it's such a integral part of the fabric of American sports culture. As great as it is also a deeply stupid sport that can't govern itself, that routinely acts in its own it routinely acts in a self-sabotaging way, and lets people um it lets people take control of it that really should not have that type of control. Unfortunately, Greg Sankey, being the commissioner of the SEC, which is pretty inarguably the most powerful conference, the most powerful voice in college football. um the Big Ten is there, but the Big Ten is largely turned into the SEC's lapdog. They pretty much just have created a voting block amongst those two, even though the Big Ten doesn't really, they don't make decisions. I mean, Greg Sankey functionally runs both conferences, or he decides for both conferences. He tells the Big Ten what they're supposed to think, which is unfortunate, because the Big Ten is an old, historic, proud conference of you know college football royalty and prestige. Um, but now, like I said, they're the SEC's lapdog, and they don't want to stand up. And we get this quote last week from Greg Sankey that says, "I don't need lectures from others about the good of the game," which is an extremely combative and defensive quote from Greg Sankey. And I believe that is because he is feeling the heat about some of these playoff proposals, where we're talking about a 4-4-2-2 model, where the SEC and the Big Ten get 4 teams, and the Big 12 and the ACC get 2, and there's some at larges. And ever since some of these different proposals have come out, um, they've caught a ton of flack on social media and things like that, with basically everybody that matters calling it a genuinely stupid thing, that the SEC is blatantly and publicly trying to rig college football in their favor. And there's lots of tweets and memes just saying, "Oh, well, if the NBA, a sarcastic tweet that says, no, the NBA has decided to create automatic playoff bids for the Lakers and Celtics, because this year the finals is the Pacers and the Thunder, which is two small market teams. And so from now on, they're going to create automatic buy-ins for the Lakers and Celtics, and make sure that their big market teams get in the playoffs." And you see there's been lots of versions of that meme, but essentially, like, all of them are trying to demonstrate the idea that it's an objectively stupid thing in your sport, that if you're complaining that not enough of your teams are making the playoff, or making your sports, highest postseason honor, making their postseason play, their playoff, whatever, playing for their championship, that, oh, it's perfectly normal to just say, well, we deserve to have more, so we're just gonna change the structure and do what we want. We're gonna put whoever we want in there, because right now college football doesn't have a commissioner, but the guy that's basically just decided to start acting like the commissioner is Greg Sankey. And obviously he wants to protect the SEC, but also not just protect the SEC, but I believe he has a very specific. I think he has a very specific agenda to try to like if it were. I think if it were his decision, he would take 30 or 40 teams from from the SEC and the Big Ten, and they would split off and do their own thing and leave everybody else in the dust because that's just that's what they think will make them the most money. That's what Greg Sankey believes will most easily line his pockets in the future. I think there's a lot of problems with that thinking, even from Greg Sankey's standpoint, because I would believe he's completely ignoring the fundamental things that make college football great. And I think they believe that this is an Iowa State channel. I think Greg Sankey believes that if the SEC and the Big Ten were to peel off and make a 30 or 40 team league, that Iowa State fans would be like, oh well, now I need to find a team to cheer for in this new league. Like, why would Iowa State fans or Oklahoma State fans or West Virginia fans or Kansas State fans or Clemson fans, well, maybe Clemson because they'd get taken with, or NC State fans or North Carolina fans or Virginia fans, why wouldn't any of them pick a new team to cheer for? Why would they pay attention to that league? They have no rooting interest in that league anymore. This is like it's not like Greg Sankey is one of those people that believes that like everybody has their team and they have an SEC team. Like we're all Iowa State fans, but we're really all Tennessee fans or LSU fans or Ole Miss fans or whatever. But we're also deeply a fan of some SEC school, and that we'll follow them to watch this new league. Or that Oklahoma State fans they'll cheer for Oklahoma in this new league, even though Oklahoma State would probably get left behind. They'll cheer for Oklahoma because it's the same state and all that. No, they won't. They might tune in to watch Oklahoma lose, but they're not cheering for Oklahoma. They're not cheering for A&M or Texas or anybody else. Big 12, ACC fans, Pac fans, they are not G5 fans. They're not just going to magically up and just move their allegiance over to this new league, which would probably still be playing on Saturdays. And then you'd still have all the rest of the college football doing their thing too. Like we're going to still follow Iowa State football. Iowa State could drop down to FCS and we would still watch Iowa State football because a lot of us went there. Most of us went there, I think, or, went there, are related to people that went there or are going to be going there in the case of high school students and things like that. We're not going to just cheer for a different team because they went off and played for some self-created, self-important national championship that nobody else cares about. Why would we go watch them? Like it's not, like I said, I think that goes back to my point about how I think it's even just a dumb idea. I think it's brain dead thinking. It's brain dead logic for Greg Sankey to think that that's even a good idea to break off his own league. But I also think he doesn't like when people challenge him. He's getting super defensive because everybody, even SEC fans, are like, no, this is stupid. Why are we rigging the college football playoff? So finally, people are disagreeing with him and he gets super defensive because his ego is out of control and he doesn't like it very much. And I think he doesn't like it very much that the Big 12 and the ACC have done their best to stand up to the SEC and to throw whatever weight they can around and to, I think Greg Sankey thinks that they've been a thorn in his side. So I think he probably has some sort of grudge against those two conferences. And that comment says what you need to see right there. I don't need lectures from others about the good of the game. He believes Greg Sankey he has a God complex in this scenario. He believes that he alone knows what's best for college football. But he does not realize that his opinion is functionally the opinion of someone that absolutely hates college football and hates what the sport has always been about, and what people love about college football. He either fundamentally misunderstands or detests what the average college football fan appreciates about the sport and appreciates about the game, and why people follow certain teams or follow their schools or whatever else. He doesn't understand that, or he actively hates that someone might cheer for Oklahoma State instead of Oklahoma, or they might cheer for TCU instead of Texas, or they might cheer for NC State instead of Clemson, or something like that. He hates that idea that anybody else, that any other schools have anything to do, or that are in the same league as his beloved sacred SEC. And it's frankly disgusting, and it's going to I I fully believe that if Greg Sankey is able to get his way, um, I believe that that would be the, where we look back in 50 or 100 years or whatever, and college football is completely dead. This doesn't, frankly, just doesn't exist as a sport, or certainly not how it looks like now. That we can look at that and say, this was, of the many problems, the many red flags along the way, this was the moment that college football really turned downwards. The arrows did not, the arrow no longer pointed straight to the moon in terms of popularity and in terms of money. And I can't, and frankly, I can't even believe that some people are supporting, um, supporting what he has to say and saying like, well, we have the best teams. Like, well, you play 8 conference games. You need, like, even the Big Ten plays 9 conference games. They will actually prove themselves over a full season. The SEC teams refuse to do that. And they've got this feedback loop where the SEC is, well, they're good because they were ranked well in the preseason and all this. And it's just, it's pretty nonsense. I don't I don't understand why people, I mean, I do understand why people keep, you know, keep carrying water for this guy. Especially like Oklahoma fans, as soon as they left the Big 12, Texas and Oklahoma fans specifically, when they were leaving the Big 12 and going to the SEC, were perfectly willing to get on the floor and start shining Greg Sankey's shoes, and really just kind of bow down to whatever he said, because finally they were getting an invite to the beloved SEC, and they were free of the scourge that is the Big 12. And it was pretty disgusting behavior, to be frank. And Oklahoma fans were always making these jokes like, "Oh, we just wanted to play Nebraska at night," which is an objectively stupid thing. Like, nobody one that's has nothing to do with anything, and also like it's just a stupid joke that's not funny. Um, I mean, frankly, the Oklahoma and Texas and the SEC are responsible for most of this. They're responsible for all this realignment, for uh, re reimagining the college football playoff in favor of the SEC and the Big Ten. You know, getting rid of the automatic seeds being in the being the the top four. The conference champions being uh, the top four, and you know they won't admit to it. They won't admit that they caused the problem, but they did. They started this round of it. Did were they reopening a scab or a wound that already was festering and already existed? To a certain extent, yeah. Like I said, the NIL and the conference realignment and the march for more and more TV dollars was, it's been a long road coming since, the 80s, the 70s, when TV started to really blow up and college football started to become a really, really valuable TV product. It was a long road coming, but Oklahoma and Texas, in their moment of greed, decided that they might as well just take care of those two. They should take care of themselves in favor of, or at the expense of functionally beginning the slow destruction of college football as a sport. And it's exhausting to hear these types of comments from people like Greg Sankey that are in power year over year after year after year after year, basically insinuating that only a certain handful of teams really actually matter in college football, and that they're the only ones worth listening to. They're the only ones worth, you know, making sure that there's a sport to play and stuff like, yeah. It infuriates me because it's just a fundamental misunderstanding misunderstanding of why college football is where it is right now. People are watching, and it is worth so much money because it is unique from so many other things, not just in United States, in American sports, but just in world sports. It's like a totally unique thing, for how popular it is, given what level of sport it is, and the athletes and everything like that. It's a unique thing. And where you're not just a fan because you live near the team, but if you're a fan because your grandparents went there, your parents went there, or you went there, you know, you know, there's deeper connections than just your the proximity of the place you were born to the location of that team. It's a fundamental thing that goes a lot deeper than that. And you have allegiances to these teams that are generations old and thing, it's a it's a precious thing that should be protected. But Greg Sankey, who is, I believe, and I don't think I'm alone in this. I think it's a pretty lukewarm take at best. Um, is the new big bad of college football, and frankly, somebody like at some point, some of this needs to break so that way college football itself can break off, get organized under something else, and um and have a college football czar in charge, a commissioner of the league that can manage all of this. So that way Greg Sankey can't just throw his weight around and do whatever the fuck he wants and reorganize college football's postseason to fit his own conference. The idea that one conference in college football has the power to essentially rig it in their favor is beyond comprehension. Like imagine in the NFL if back in the early 2010s when the AFC East was so good because the Patriots were great and the Ravens were really good, the Jets were competent and all this. You had you either or let's say you had like the NFC North this past year, where it's clearly the best division in football. What if they just said, "Well, this we were the best division in football. We were the best top to bottom. We should get all of our teams in." And then they talk to the NFL and they get the playoffs, so that way the NFC North has 3 auto buys. So now automatically 3 NFC North teams get in every single year because, well, they were the best this past. They were the best division in football this year. That sounds that's absurd. Or it's like the NBA, giving the Lakers and Celtics automatic buys. It's absurd. But here we are, and unfortunately, I don't know there's anybody that can really stand up to Greg Sankey and tell him no. Unfortunately, at this point in time, but that's just kind of where we're at, and it's frustrating. Granted, it is frustrating because it's June and there's no football going on. This is probably not something I will dedicate any brain power to once we get to August 1st in training camps, or frankly, the second to last week in July, when we have the conference media days, Big 12 media days down in Arlington. As soon as that comes around, it's football mode. We're talking players, coaches, matchups, all that good stuff. And we're not as worried about this infrastructure administrative stuff in the NCAA. But that doesn't change the fact that this directly impacts the future of the sport. And I think conference realignment is probably settled for right now. Like I don't think conferences are doing anything. Their power conferences are pretty much set for what they're going to be at least to 2030, probably closer to 2035, I would guess, before we see teams moving around again. And by then, my guess is that we have some sort of clarification on, by 2030, my guess is we will know if college football is breaking off to be its own thing away from the NCAA and they're just starting a brand new league and it's all going to be restructured, or, if we're going to have some clarity on what the college football looks like. College football is going to look like indefinitely in 2030. But, I don't know. I don't know what that's going to look like. And unfortunately, like I said, I think if Greg Sankey gets its way, I think a lot of teams are going to get screwed. I think they would take 40. I think they would put 20. I think they would take 20 in each conference. So they take the top 40 programs, which is going to be most of the Big Ten and SEC. I do believe that sooner rather than later, they're going to start kicking programs out. I don't think Vanderbilt is in the SEC in 2035. 2030, probably. 2035, I don't think after the next round of TV contracts, I don't think Vanderbilt is in the SEC. I don't know that Purdue or Northwestern are in the Big Ten. I don't know about Rutgers, and I don't know about Maryland. I'm I'm not sure. There's, you know, those 2 are gonna start kicking schools out, as, Mississippi State might be in danger of getting kicked out of the SEC, you know? They're gonna start kicking schools out, and they're gonna consolidate to get to maybe 40 teams. So they might kick those out, but they might grab a couple teams. Like, they would grab Clemson, and they'd grab Florida State, they'd probably grab Miami, they'd grab those 3 for sure. Would they grab anybody out of the Big 12? I don't know. Maybe maybe Oklahoma State. I don't know. Is Oklahoma State a top 40 brand in college football? They're probably close. If they're not there, they're probably close. I don't know if West Virginia's there. BYU maybe. Kind of depends on who's winning, I think, for the next 5 years. Like, if Iowa State can regularly compete for Big 12 titles and make a playoff or 2 in the next 5 years, maybe Iowa State gets there. But, you know, if it's top 40, we're gonna be on our pin on we're gonna be on pins and needles to figure out if we're on that cut. Because right now you're probably in the 40 to 50 range, maybe. And maybe 40 to somewhere in the 40 to 60 range. If you're in if they take 60 teams to a new power league or something like that, I think Iowa State's probably safely in there. If it's 40, you're pretty nervous. So, the best thing that Iowa State can do in all this time is to just keep winning, which I know is a really like it's a really overly simplistic answer, and it's just like that's the old saying that winning cures everything is fundamentally true, pretty much. That's both from recruiting and from a money standpoint, from season ticket sales to TV contracts, and maybe in the not so distant future, maybe it's trying to play your way into a new power league, which sucks because even if we all say like, well, the G5 is there, they rarely matter as far as like the national title goes. Last year Boise State was very good. They were an automatic bye team. Cincinnati was in a playoff, not that long ago. Occasionally there are G5 programs that do factor in as far as, determining a national champion goes. But for the most part, most of the G5 doesn't really play a factor, but that doesn't matter. That people like the fact that you can watch a MAC game on Thursday night. That's part of the fabric of college football. They want to watch Wazoo, Oregon State late night on a Saturday. That's what college football nerd. That's what the college football sickos want to watch. You know, sure is Ohio State, Michigan a ratings monster that will always draw 10, 20, 15, 20 million people? Yeah, it's gonna. Does that delegitimize the I don't know if importance is the right word, but I'll use importance right now because I think that's the word I'm thinking of isn't coming to my head, but the importance of Western Michigan and Toledo facing off against each other, as it relates to the fabric of college football and what's great about it. If you lose out on Tulane playing fun conference games and pushing for a playoff spot, is college football. I mean, college football I think is objectively worse if that comes to fruition. Does it change who's playing for a national title? Probably not. But it makes college football a demonstrably worse thing. It makes it less interesting to follow. All of a sudden, the new college football video game we just got back out is suddenly less interesting because now you can't. Now you're not rebuilding Appalachian State, or you're not taking over Kennesaw State, or this year Missouri State and Delaware that are jumping up. I feel like the Blue Hens are probably going to be a pretty popular uh, dynasty mode team. But you lose some of that stuff. Like I said, all of it factors into the fabric of the sport and what makes it great. And the people in charge right now are either deeply stupid, deeply ignorant, or fundamentally uh, misaligned with the average college football fan. Probably some combination of all three. And maybe not deeply stupid isn't the right word. Like, I don't think Greg Sankey is an unintelligent individual. I think he's probably plenty smart, and I think that's why he's doing what he's doing. But uh, deeply ignorant, or actively opposing the will of the average college football fan. Because I don't think if there was an opinion poll conducted on some of the stuff that the SEC has been proposing, I don't think it would poll very highly. I just don't. And unfortunately, too, the real arbiters of what happens in the college football playoff and all this, unfortunately, the real arbiters of this are ESPN. Pretty much almost all ESPN, since they own the playoff. Um, they they essentially get final say in how this thing works out, because the college football conference commissioners can all come together. It's like, oh, we want this model. It's just the top 12 teams, and that's what it is. Or it's just it's automatic buys for all the conference champions, and or everybody gets two automatic bids, and then we do um at larges from there. Maybe that's what the solution is. All the conference. Let's say Greg Sankey isn't a complete asshat for one day, and he somehow convinces everybody to buy into a 2-2-2-2-2 model with four buys or something, or not four buys, with four at larges, a 14 team model with four at larges, and 10 automatic qualifiers. And you propose that to ESPN. ESPN could just say, we're not interested in televising that. And then all of a sudden, now the conference commissioners have to back down. Maybe Fox pays for it, but Fox won't. If ESPN steps away from the table, Fox isn't going to pay what ESPN used to pay. So now the conference commissioners have to deal with losing money because they aren't essentially appeasing what ESPN wants. And ESPN wants to jam in as many high profile Big Ten and SEC matchups as they can. And that sucks because Greg Sankey is in cahoots with them. You have ESPN that wants to churn as much money out of this thing as they possibly can for as long as they possibly can, even though that they continue to be a company that is struggling financially. And then you have a commissioner that is in bed with them, and is also just has animus against the Big 12, the ACC, and frankly the rest of the G5. He just doesn't like college football. he likes SEC football, and he knows that at least needs the Big Ten to also like SEC football, so that way they can go do what they want. But right now he's got the Big Ten sitting nicely in his lap, doing whatever and saying whatever he wants, and that's how he likes it.